Is he an MVP candidate, or should he just get votes? That's very different.
To be quite honest with you, I think that he actually should be at the top of the MVP discussion. And I'm going to tell you why. Because even though that his numbers don't necessarily scream out that he's the best player on this team, you can't tell me that his impact hasn't been probably the biggest on one team this year. Because look at him last year when he was playing with OKC. OKC wasn't even expected to make the playoffs last year, and they made it to the 5th seed and almost got to the second round of the playoffs against Houston last year. Now he's inserted on a team that has some great youth, especially with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. And you look at what Chris Paul is doing this year. He's shooting almost 50% from the field. That's his highest mark since 2008 or 2009. He's shooting 93% from the free throw line. He's averaging almost 9 assists per game, which is basically his best total since the last maybe year or two that he was with the Clippers. So, granted, I understand when it comes to his points per game, it's not the most impressive. He's only scoring 16.2, which is a step down from last year when he was averaging about 17.5 with OKC. But his impact to this team, to where Phoenix is currently, that they're the number 1 seed where nobody was expecting that. You have to give Chris Paul a ton of credit for getting this team to where it is. Obviously, there's a lot of other players that you could talk about. Devin Booker is one of the best up-and-coming players that this league has to offer. DeAndre Ayton is a solid big man for this team. And then, obviously, you have to give a lot of credit to where Monty Williams is as far as a head coach goes in this league. Because this guy in Monty Williams has guided this team in a direction that I didn't even envision them getting to.
Word. No one did. Not
year.
this
Nobody.
Good.
So I think when it comes to Chris Paul, though, he is like having a coach out on the court. I know you always hear the word the floor general, and with him, he's just a great facilitator, what a lot of people would consider like the prototypical point guard with the ability to shoot and pass the way that he has. And it has just done wonders for this Phoenix team. And I don't think he's going to win the MVP. I don't know if he's even going to get a lot of votes. I'm just saying, based off of his play and the impact that he's had on this team, he deserves to be at the top of the MVP discussion. I'm not saying I'm not saying the front runner. I'm not saying that. But when you look at the group of guys that are gunning for it, he should be in that group.
He for sure deserves a vote, first and foremost. I'm not going to sit here and act like he doesn't. Secondly, I pulled up Steve Nash's statistics. We all know that Steve Nash won 2 MVPs in back-to-back seasons in 2005 and 2006, while averaging a measly 18 points per game. Now, the difference is in that season, he not only averaged 18 points per game, but he averaged over 50% from the field, averaged over 42% each season from the three-point line. In one season, he averaged 45% from the three, while averaging 10-plus assists and damn near 90% from the free throw line. So those are absolute insane numbers, while obviously leading Phoenix to multiple playoff berths in those eras. And we're just sitting here looking at it just like, dude, Chris Paul has started to flirt with those numbers for a little bit, and obviously not as many points, not as many assists. His field goal percentage isn't as high, and neither is his 3-point percentage. But he's playing that level of basketball. The Suns are relevant again. They haven't been relevant since this era of Phoenix. He's coaching up a very young and incredible superstar in Devin Booker. He is literally, like Kyle said, a floor general and extended coach on this floor, rallying this young team to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NBA, depending on who you ask. So I truthfully believe and think that he should get a vote or two, because without him, this team is dog shit again. I mean, who's to say they don't make the playoffs this year? They were going to do really good things if it wasn't for Chris Paul. Obviously, the way that they had ended last season in the bubble. but I don't think they would be anywhere near as good if he was not on this team. So he is definitely right now an actual candidate for a true most valuable player, because without him, the Suns are just nowhere near as productive or successful. And I mean, to sit here and look at Steve Nash, one of the greatest point guards this era's ever seen, and compare their numbers, ironically enough, for the same team, it's just crazy, man. I can't sit here and look at this and be like, wow, like Chris Paul is putting up some ridiculous numbers for somebody that was just on OKC and carried them to a playoff berth as well after the departure of Paul George and Russell Westbrook and a litany of other players. So yes, Chris definitely deserves love, respect, and recognition. And I think that he's very much underappreciated because of the amount of times that he's moved. But his level of play cannot be denied, and I think that he definitely deserves at least some recognition for it.
He turns 36 in a week.
Nuts.
Like, it's
Nuts.
crazy that even though that this is not Chris Paul back when he was with the Hornets in New Orleans, or even in the beginning days when he was with the Clippers, he is so valuable to this team. And I'll tell you this, if you take Chris Paul away from this team, I think this team does make the playoffs. I think they squeak in, though. I think they barely get in, just because just the veteran presence that he brings to this team, I think, is so crucial, especially for these young guys.
Insane, bro. Insane.
Now, granted, he's not a champion, so he doesn't have finals experience, but he has a lot of playoff experience that not a lot of these guys have. So trust me, when we get into the playoffs here, these guys are going to lean on Chris Paul's expertise and knowledge of the game, especially when it gets, into the last 2 minutes of the game and you're looking at a potential chance or opportunity to get into the next opponent in the playoffs or to get to the next series in the playoffs. They're going to need Chris Paul to step up, and I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Paul knocks down some really key shots going into the last couple games of the regular season, and I expect him to do the same once it gets into the playoffs. Because I don't know if you saw the highlights when they were playing the Knicks the other day, when he basically knocked down like 2 crazy shots to end the Knicks 9-game winning
streak. The three was wild. That was a I'm here moment, and like Chris Paul knocked it down.
He is capable of knocking down those shots consistently, and when it gets into the playoffs, if it's a close game and you got to try to guard Chris Paul, good luck.
Because he's either, we all know Chris Paul is some of the best handles in the NBA. Obviously, we're not talking about Stephen Curry handle, Kyrie Irving handle. He knows how to get himself open. He knows how to create space and get other players involved as well as open. So you're going to tell me in an isolation point in the final possession of a basketball game where a pick is coming and he's either going to facilitate off of the mismatch, off of that pick and roll, or he's going to just blow by you and pull. As one of the most effective mid-range jump shot shooters in our generation, if not all time, the man has mastered the mid-range jump shot. Yeah. And obviously now in his later years, he has, kind of relied a little bit more on his three-point shot because he does not want to drive into the paint and, risk an injury or try to make a man miss and do some of the things that a lot of these younger point guards are doing. He doesn't have to do any of that like he used to in New Orleans or in LA. I mean, the options that this man has when he has the ball in his hand, the phrase triple threat could not be scarier because he can literally shoot it, he can pass it, and he can drive it in all facets of the word. And at 36 years old, still one of the best players in the league. And it just shows that this year, even with a whole new team for the second straight year, his impact is unmatched. And Chris Paul, like Kyle said, man, game on the line on this team. Obviously, you want to get it to Devin Booker just because Devin is probably the most electrifying offensive player on this team and his ability to shoot all over the floor. But if you actually have time to run a play and run a set, Chris Paul's your guy, man. You get Chris Paul that basketball, and I guarantee you either he gets a great look or he's getting somebody a better one because he just has that effect on his team, man. It's crazy. I was always a Chris Paul fan to an extent of I appreciated him being an undersized guard, being a very physical defender, coming in there and being a great facilitator and a good teammate. But as he got older, you know what I'm saying, especially when he left the Clippers in the later years and went to Houston, that team up with James Harden, that attitude, that chippiness, like it seemed like the older he got, the more he started to talk, and it got a little annoying for me. But overall, man, Chris Paul has been a staple in this league for the last 15 years, and he's finally now hitting that stride of I'm on an amazing team and I have a shot to compete for a title. He hasn't been on a team like this since the Clippers, and I know for a fact that he's excited and he's going to lead this team hopefully into a good enough playoff run where they can at least get to a Western Conference semifinals or finals appearance. Don't be surprised if they go to the finals if they continue this pace.
This team is legitimately a finals contender. And I know
100%.
we kind of thought about maybe possibly introducing that idea maybe halfway through the season just because they've been playing lights out in the first half of the season. We're getting to the last 2 to 3 weeks of the second half of the season.
And they're still playing it even better.
And they are basically fighting for that number one spot. So granted, we have to see how this team does in the playoffs just because this team by and large doesn't have a lot of playoff experience outside of Paul. But man, this dude is just dynamite. Chris Paul has been playing up to snuff the entire year. And I mean, whether he wins MVP or not, I don't think he's going to.
No.
But he's a huge reason why this team is where it's at and where they could potentially go if they play their cards right.